able to join us. I'm excited to welcome Jewel to the chat. If you guys have any questions about the case or anything, she's happy to join us. I'll get her on stage here. Thanks for joining us. How's everything going where you're at?
Oh, it's been a crazy week, but we have been dealing with this since the indictment last May. So a lot of the mishaps that y'all are learning about, we are not a stranger to. So it's crazy, but not unusual.
Yeah. So just the whole not starting on time, them, wanting to fight about stuff outside the jury. I mean, obviously there was no jury in the pretrial stuff, but all this stuff, this kind of disorganization, was that pretty common throughout?
Absolutely. I mean, even think about the jury selection. We started picking a jury the first day of January when trial started, right? When court started. We didn't select a jury till this month. I mean, and I remember when we started in January, the judge said, I think about 6 to 8 weeks is a good benchmark because that's what it took in another high profile RICO case here in Georgia. And so we all thought, okay, 2 months for jury selection. And then it just kept going and kept going and kept going. So these delays and kind of odd timelines, we're pretty used to them now.
Yeah. Well, so you were at the courthouse for opening statements.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
or
was.
both days of opening statements. What's the atmosphere like there? Is it pretty packed? Because I mean, for on camera, it looks you really can't see any of the gallery. You just see the gallery that's taken up by the defense tables. But is there like a back kind of room area where people are seated?
Yeah, so the courtroom is pretty large, and I will say this is actually one of 2 courtrooms that is being used for this trial. So in our courtroom, you have what you all can see on the camera, which is where the 6 defendants and their legal teams are seated. And then you have kind of some more seating where family members and friends, family and friends of the victims that were mentioned in opening arguments, they were seated there, as well as they let about 7 members of the media in, and everybody else gets sent to a media room. But there's also a second additional room on a higher floor in the courtroom for more family members and friends. And that's where Kevin Liles, who is the CEO of 300 Entertainment, the distributor of YSL Records, he was seated up there. Some other people from Warner Music were up there. So there's even another courtroom, a smaller courtroom where people are seated as well.
Interesting. So are there any victims' family members up there? Like, is there any kind of awkward interaction between defendants' families and victims' families? Or?
There haven't been any awkward interactions. There have been some, I think, tough moments for victims' family, like the family of Donovan Thomas has been in court this week. And so I think, there was a moment where a prosecutor showed a photo of him deceased alongside a Young Thug lyrics, the 100 rounds in a Tahoe lyric. And I think that obviously visibly upset his family. So they kind of got up and walked out for a little bit. We're teary-eyed, but there haven't been any awkward interactions between the two.
Yeah. And now the witness that's testifying today, there was a preliminary hearing in this where he testified there. And
it wasn't much about what he would be speaking on. So a lot of what we're hearing today is what we're hearing for the first time, right? So he testified more to his qualifications. It was a qualifying hearing. So really trying to show the judge that he had the credentials and the experience to be qualified to be a gang expert in this case. But a lot of what we're hearing, the 70 slides and all of that, that stuff we're seeing for the first time.
Now, has there been any talk about how long he might testify for? Are we expecting the direct to go like into the day, or do we know?
What's interesting, we don't know for sure, but yesterday when the judge asked how many witnesses they had ready and they thought they might put up, they said 6, and then they said 3. Again, we know that everything is delayed in this case, so I don't know how long it will go, but I just know that originally they said they had 6 witnesses ready to go today, then they lowered it down to 3. Of course, you can see we're about to come back from lunch, so it's not really clear how many other, and it's a pretty substantial slide, right? So it's not really clear how many other witnesses we'll hear from today.
And so can you talk about, you've covered this since like the very beginning, right? Since the first indictment.
Well, yeah, because as an entertainment reporter here in Atlanta, I was covering Young Thug and I was covering Gunna and some of the rappers in the case long before the indictment ever happened. I did a cover profile, not a cover, of Gunna for GQ, and Young Thug was there. I went to his listening party when the album went to #1 in January of last year. And then months later, right, he's getting arrested and indicted. So I've been covering this the entirety of the trial, and even them as artists before.
Now, how surprising was the indictment? Like, if were people kind of whispering that this could be coming, or was it a huge shock?
I don't think anybody expected it to come when it came, and I don't think anybody expected it to be as massive as it was, right? 56 counts, 28 defendants. It's a really like large indictment. But I also think if you talk to people in Atlanta and say, is YSL a gang? A lot of people will be like, yeah, so there have been rumblings and like talks about YSL and kind of gang activity or things like that. But as far as the indictment itself, I think, I was at home on Twitter like everybody else when this flashes up, and I'm like, oh, what is going on?
Yeah. Well, how, I mean, other than the procedural stuff and kind of the typical snafus that we saw, how do you think the first couple days went? I mean, was this what you expected?
Yes, I think I was shocked by how unprepared the prosecution seemed a bit with their presentation, the typos, some of the factual errors that they went back and forth with for a while. Like you said, not presenting the documents that they were supposed to present. We've seen some of that, but for opening arguments, I was really surprised by that. And also, I mean, I think we've all seen kind of the jokes on Twitter about Young Thug's defense attorney and some of the the acronyms, the explanations for some of this. But I also think defense attorneys, with the case that they've been presented, they are putting on the best case that they can, and really trying to go overact for overact, charge for charge, and really explain all of this. My biggest question in all of this is there's a lot of names, there's a lot of defendants, there's a lot of alleged victims, there are a lot of attorneys, a lot of dates and times. And I wonder if this is going to become really overwhelming and too much for the jury to kind of parse through.
That's what I was wondering, because I was just thinking, like, I've covered, much shorter trials with like 50 witnesses where the judge thinks that the jury should get like pictures of the witnesses so they can remember who they are.
Absolutely.
So it's like, gosh, if you really call all these people, like, how are you going to be able to sort that through?
Exactly. For the prosecution to say they have 400 part plan, that's down from 700 witnesses, right? So you're having to remember all of these witnesses. You have 6 defendants, but then you also have the defendants that have already taken plea deals, the affiliates, the victims, right? We're going through all these different years, and sometimes we'll talk about one year and circle back to another year. I worry that it can get a little confusing with all of these factual details.
Yeah, gosh, seriously. Well, you've seen the jury. What are they like age-wise? Are there some young people in there? I heard the DA make those references to, TPing a college dean's house. I'm like, are we just looking at a bunch of 21-year-olds, or where?
No, I try not to speculate on people's ages, but from what I gather, there is one younger male on the jury. The other ones tend to be older, and I don't mean like senior, but older Black women. And there are 2 white people on the jury. I did not get to see them the second day. They sat us in a different place yesterday. And that was a little frustrating, but there's a wall between the jury and kind of us. So we weren't able to see them, which sucked because I really wanted to see how they were reacting to Brian Steele and some of the defense attorneys and some of those moments that we were all reacting to. But on day 1, I could see them, and they were taking notes and kind of, they were actively engaged on day 1.
And one thing you touched on with just like the range of the case and all the charges, but the difference in like the high end defense attorneys, which all of them seem really good. But then Rodri, the 19-year-old's lawyer, who she had the 6-minute closing where I mean, because really she has the smallest part of the case. There's only one charge, conspiracy. But when I was Googling it, I saw that she had raised an issue that she's appointed through public defense, and her salary for this was $15,000. So she was complaining about that. And it seems like, I mean, all the hours that she's been putting into this case and having to be in court for that, that's a lot.
We started having pretrial hearings for this the summer of 2022. We went through that for the rest of 2022. January started with the trial, right, with jury selection that went through November, and now here we are with opening arguments. I mean, we're a year and a half into this and we just started with opening arguments. So
Yeah,
she
wow.
has put a significant amount of time into this for, what, she alleges is a really low pay, which I think is fair. And I do think it speaks to one of the things I'm interested in, and I know I cover celebrities, but I'm interested in the things that celebrities are afforded versus kind of the regular everyday people that are in
Yeah.
these trials. So even when we had the bond hearings for Young Thug, right? He has several homes and he's like, I can get these homes outfitted with surveillance and I can get a off-duty security, a police officer to stand outside. And he was able to offer to foot the bill for a lot of these things in an attempt to get bond, which he didn't get. But right, he had the means to do this in a way that some of the other defendants obviously don't have those type of financial means to be able to put up that type of argument.
Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking the 15,000 range. That's probably what Brian Steele made in 1 or 2 trial days, easily.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think that is one of the things that I've been really interested in. And I think, we all obviously are very interested in Young Thug and what happens to him. But I do think there are some defendants that are not Young Thug in this case, and some that aren't even rappers. There are a few, but some that aren't even rappers in this case that have really interesting stories.
Yeah, because I mean, the 19-year-old, it's just depressing to think about, someone being warehoused like that for the rest of their life for something they did when they were 15.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That was really what hit home to me when I was listening to the prosecutor's opening argument, the ages, right? Because we think some of them are in their early to mid 20s now, but 10 years ago they were 15. And, and to hear some of these ages, less than 100 pounds, and these are not things that are super uncommon here in Atlanta. There's the mayor here dubbed it the year of the youth because he wanted to really address juvenile crime here. So obviously this is something that we are all thinking about here in Atlanta, but to hear it on trial here, I think was really, really jarring.
Yeah. Gosh. I mean, I was just kind of remarking, I mean, maybe it's just, a West Coast thing, but I'm like, I can't imagine the LA County DA's office ever bringing a case like this. And in some of the testimony that we're hearing this morning, it just seems so old fashioned, this kind of gang talk about. I mean, like, you could apply this to a police department. Like the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has deputy gangs who like all have the same tattoo and like go out to bars to celebrate a police shooting. They celebrated one where a stray bullet actually killed a random citizen, and somebody within the sheriff's department complained about it because they heard that all the deputies were going out to celebrate.
So that's how it came up.
And yeah, there's been big problems with deputy gangs. So I tweeted out a moment of this expert's testimony and kind of joke like, no, he's not talking about the deputy gangs within the LHA, because he totally could be. But
well, I think I even imagine that the defense attorneys will there was a moment where he talked about what defines an affiliate. And, kind of the idea that if you live in this area and you hang out with known gang members and kind of like this criteria for affiliate. And I can just imagine the defense attorneys pouncing on that and saying like, these kids can't control where they live and like, they're being friends with gang members or whatever, I think about some of that. And I definitely think that's going to be some moments that the defense attorneys attempt to pounce on.
Has there been any indication of who is going to go first on cross? Is it going to be like it was an opening statement? Because is his first name Max, the attorney for the defendant with the most charges, right? Like he has a lot more charges than
yeah. Well, we don't know. I think even with yesterday, right, we found out just before kind of trial started, we talked to one of the attorneys, Jay Apt, and he was the one that told us that Steele was going to be up first. So we're finding out some of this kind of hour before kind of trial court gets started, the day of. I mean, obviously, I think we don't know kind of what we knew that everybody wasn't going to present defenses or their opening statements yesterday, but we didn't know what the order of presentation was going to be. So it'll be interesting to see once the state is over with that. And we still have some defense attorneys that have to give their opening statement once the state is done too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, oh yeah, did the one who waved, the ponytail guy. I when I googled him, I saw he kind of advertises his ponytail on his website. He's a liberal known for his ponytail
It's a
around.
very nice ponytail. It's a
So
very
he waived his opening, but so he can give it after the state is done presenting their case. He'll do an opening.
He'll do an
Okay,
opening and we'll go.
interesting. That's probably a good strategic thing, and that's one thing that it makes me wonder if he kind of coordinated that with some of the other attorneys, because it's a good idea if they've got 6 openings. It's like, why not just save one for later if you can give it later? Like,
And they join in a lot on motions. They have these things. Somebody tweeted me yesterday asking what the Harvey rule is, because they mentioned it in the during opening statements. And it's really not a real rule. It's just something that the defense attorneys have agreed on, that, hey, unless we otherwise say so, we're joining in on each other's motions, because I think it cuts down on the procedural kind of element of 6 different attorneys for 6 different defendants having to kind of go through some redundancies. So they've kind of come up with some ways to kind of join in on some of these motions that benefit all of them.
Good. Are we anticipating any? I mean, obviously, we're anticipating everything kind of happening because there's been so many snafus. But are there any big fights that we're going to be seeing outside of the jury over the next couple of days? Because I know we had that. It was a couple of hours. You guys were at the courthouse last night, right?
I don't know that I believe that's going to be wrapped up and done. I think we're going to be having this argument for much of, because this is not a new thing. I know that for people who are just now kind of tuning in this week, it feels new, but these arguments about getting information and when they get information, that's how we got to the 400 witnesses, because the judge finally said, okay, that's enough. I'm assuming you're not going to call 700 witnesses. We need the final witness list. We've been asking for this. Please tell us what that witness list is going to be. So these are kind of redundant arguments at this point. And I know the judge says any more of this and he's going to start to cut stuff, but he's also been saying that for a while. So I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of hearing some chatter that, I mean, he yells and acts really tough, but it's like, are you actually going to make them face consequences for doing this?
No. Yesterday Monday, there was a moment where we came back from lunch and he had given them the directive of, all right, I'm tired of arguing about these slideshows. Over lunch, defense attorneys get with prosecutors, hash out the facts. When I come back, if there is one more objection to these slideshows, I'm cutting them out. We come back from lunch and he says, did you guys hash it out? And the defense attorney said, we didn't get any new updates. And the prosecutor said, well, I updated it in the same link. And he went, that's it. I'm cutting it. No one can use presentations moving forward in these opening arguments. And then the defense attorney stood up and objected to that. And of course, the opening arguments and slideshows were used throughout the rest of the thing. So sometimes that is the thing that I'm mindful of as I'm live tweeting, is sometimes I try to give it a beat when he makes like these grand rulings, because he might walk it back a few minutes later. And I don't want to have to then confuse people who are watching this virtually by saying he just made this big ruling and then 5 minutes later, just kidding, we're not doing that anymore.
There's a federal judge like that in Orange County where if you go and sit in this courtroom, you'll hear him talk and you'll be like, what? This is a huge story. A federal judge is about to do this. This is crazy. But then you'll wait around all day and he never actually does it.
Exactly.
Really weird day in court. Like, gosh. So any idea who is kind of the first chunk of witnesses? Are we going to be hearing from a lot of gang experts, or are they going to mix it up? Or is Lil Wayne next in the queue, or who's actually going to testify? I'm skeptical whether. I mean, they've totally left it open so that it would make sense if he did, and especially her line about how you're going to hear that Lil Wayne hadn't threatened anyone. It's like, I guess they could get that in from other people, but are they depending on Lil Wayne's testimony to get that in?
I don't know. And I think it would be really interesting because Steele spent a significant amount of time on, that's his idol. Doug loves, Lil Wayne, and he got so much of who he is as an artist in the early days from emulating Lil Wayne. That's his friend and his, you know what I mean? And so if Lil Wayne was to actually take the stand, I think that would be a very interesting, I wonder what we would learn that we, otherwise would not have known about that relationship between those two rappers. But we don't know yet. And the prosecutors were pretty tight-lipped about it yesterday when we were kind of trying to figure out what the lineup of witnesses would be today and in the coming days. But it does seem like we're going to kind of focus on those gang experts to start.
Okay. Are there Are there other there are other rappers on the witness list? Isn't T.I. on the witness list? I guess when I was listening to openings, I didn't really hear how T.I. would actually fit in as a witness. I mean, is there kind of some thought that he won't actually testify, or
I
we don't
joke
really.
to everyone that if you live in Atlanta, Ti pops up everywhere all the time. So I would, if Ti popped up, it would be another day in Atlanta. I don't know why he would, but
Yeah.
I do know that Ti, Killer Mike, right, like these kind of big figures have been a real part of kind of the protest against using rap lyrics in court. Killer Mike wrote the foreword for that book, Rap on Trial, that they
Yeah.
bring up a lot in this case, and Eric Nielsen is on Thug's witness list. And so, you know, I know that they are involved in that. But, and, you know, so maybe they are going to be coming on to talk about kind of the prosecution of rap music, right? This kind of idea that Brian Still is really using as the crux of a lot of his argument. But yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be some really great defense witnesses in this. Definitely the experts on that. But gosh, it's going to be like, I mean, it could be a good 4 months or so until we even get to the defense side of the case, right? Like,
It's so
crazy.
interesting because the prosecution says 4 months, and then everybody's like, "Be serious! It's going to be 6 months to a year." I have given up on trying to have realistic timelines or even trying to predict on the record what a timeline for this trial is or will be. So I am just along for the ride, but I definitely think at least 4 months. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what are your coverage plans? Are you full time somewhere? Are you writing? You're covering for Billboard and covering for some other outlets too, or how can people find your work?
I am, and my social media is the same across the board. Instagram, Twitter is at Jewel Wicker. So my name on the screen, and then show SHOW at the end. I am still where I talked to Billboard today, still working through coverage plans. It is really difficult as a freelancer, which I'm sure you know, Meghann, to cover a trial, specifically a trial that is estimated to last 6 months to a year, and to try to kind of figure out what that looks like. But I'm really committed to seeing this through. I posted earlier today. I'd already kind of done a every other week newsletter where I kept people updated on jury selection in the case. My plan is to go to publishing that once a week now, just so that people can get the meat and potatoes of what's happening each week in the trial if they're interested. But of course, I'll be there on significant days, and I'll be live tweeting and posting about what's going on. So I think follow me on social media, subscribing to my newsletter. Even when I write for other publications, I post it all there, so you'll be able to see it.
Yeah, that'll be great. That'll be great. And I mean, it's so nice to have this live stream. That it makes it pretty easy to monitor. But you know, nothing replaces actually like being in the courtroom. But gosh, just the way this goes, I can't imagine how painful it would be if there wasn't a live stream to monitor and you just had to be there all the
You're
time.
very right, but you always get to see the interesting characters if you go in person, and everybody's asking about Young Thug's girlfriend, who is also a singer, and if she's been there, and she's been there every day. She was there before us yesterday morning. She was the first person in court waiting. She had some clothes to give him. She's done that both days, and you know, so you go there and you get to talk to people. And I was familiar with her. I'd already interviewed her before this. But you go there and you get to talk to family members, and you get to talk to friends and people involved with the case that you quite frankly wouldn't be the attorneys. You get tips and things like that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get if you weren't in person.
Yeah. And do we have any insight into the transport process for him? I mean, are everyone's in custody, right?
Everybody's in custody, but not at the same jail.
Okay.
Which is a thing that they are trying to bring up. I think one of the defense attorneys, I think it was Keratin, attorney Keratin, that brought it up, Keratin Matthews, who brought it up yesterday. The Fulton County Jail, where some of the defendants are housed, there were a significant amount of deaths this year at that jail. Somebody died covered in bed bugs over the summer, and there was the DOJ is launching an investigation into the jail, and so I think a part of their defense is going to be that these people have been housed for a year and a half now, some of them longer, in a jail that has some significant health risks to them.
God. Well, I mean, I was thinking there's just so many charges. I mean, the case seems to have a lot of problems with it for sure, and there's so many like defenses, but God, anytime you have this number of defendants and this number of charges, it's like, look, chances are somebody's going to get convicted of something.
We have to be honest.
It's just who and what, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we can't negate, and I try to balance this. Obviously, as an entertainment reporter, I've talked a lot about the use of lyrics in the case and all of these things, but we cannot negate the fact that there are people who've died in this case, and there are actual victims in this case. And, you know, whether or not these people are found guilty of killing said victims, you know, debatable. We'll have to wait and see. But I don't ever want to minimize the fact that there are people who are actually dead and have been killed and harmed in these instances.
Donovan Thomas, you said some of his family members are there, and that was a pretty high profile murder in Atlanta at the time that it happened.
It was. And I think because Thomas was affiliated with a rapper named Rich Homie Quan, who is in a group. I'm not Rich Homie Quan, I'm sorry. He is affiliated with Rich Homie Quan, but YFN Lucci, who is a kind of rival of Young Thug's. Brian Steele brought him up yesterday, said that he made less money and used Young Thug's name for clout kind of thing. YFN Lucci is also in jail and in custody and is supposed to stand trial for a RICO case with several co-defendants in January. So kind of a brother case to this one. Whether or not we will have both cases going on at the same time, we will wait and see what happens in January. But I think Thomas was a big deal here locally in Atlanta, but also YFN Lucci talked about his death a lot in his music. And so I think even those outside of Atlanta, he was known as Nut, even those outside of Atlanta were familiar kind of with what he meant to some of our artists here.
And do we have insight into how they're actually going to be like incorporating the song lyrics into the testimony? Like, is the detective testifying today? Or are we going to start hearing about song lyrics later in his testimony, do you think? Or do you think there's somebody else who's going to bring that in?
I think we'll probably hear it sprinkled throughout. I'm not sure exactly what their plan is. I know that we had a hearing about the use of lyrics a week or two ago. I know Thanksgiving, so maybe 2 weeks ago. And the judge conditionally admitted 17 lyrics and said that he'll kind of make final decisions or, about each lyric and how they can be used as they come up, right? But conditionally, those 17 lyrics will be admitted. I think that the prosecution's argument is that the lyrics cannot be separated from the crimes. So I don't foresee it being separated in testimony either, right? I think we're going to start to see a lot of these witnesses bring up how the lyrics are relevant to the specific crimes that they're alleging.
Interesting. And as we talked about, Donovan Thomas is a big one, but then one of the other, there's two murders, right? Donovan Thomas and then three. The victim's last name is Drinks.
Shamel Drinks.
Shamel Drinks. And the third one, who's the victim there?
I have to look up the name. I'm sorry. I remember Shamel Drinks and I remember Donovan Thomas. I'll tweet out for you guys what the name was. I'll look it up once we get off the thing.
But three, like you were saying, like there's like real people impacted by this.
Absolutely. And the thing that the prosecutors brought up was that, Donovan Thomas was this gang leader and kind of had a beef or an argument or of some sort with members of YSL. But the other kind of killings in this case were more random and more kind of victims who were kind of victims of opportunity or just kind of, weren't affiliated with YSL in any way and just happened to kind of fall into some unfortunate circumstances and be killed for it. So it's really unfortunate.
And is Shamel Drinks he's not the 15-year-old, or is the third murder the 15-year-old?
Yes, the third murder is the 15-year-old.
Okay, who is also 15. That's another thing. I mean, I saw people online remarking how depressing and sad it is that a 15-year-old is like serving life, but it's also even more depressing and sad that a 15-year-old was murdered. I mean, think about his family and all that stuff.
It's horrific. It is absolutely horrific. We haven't, and again, there are two separate courtrooms. So if their family is in a separate courtroom and we're in one courtroom, we wouldn't necessarily see them unless we ran into them kind of in the hallway. But the family members that we have seen have been the family of Donovan Thomas.
And was there any complaint, like pretrial, from victims advocates, or did they have lawyers saying that they should be allotted seats in the courtroom? Because I just see that as being kind of shitty for them, that they go to the courthouse and they have to go and watch it in another room when it's like, well, the whole thing's being live streamed. I mean, how is their experience any different than?
Yeah, they've been discussing the logistics of that courtroom for months now. Even when it comes down to media, we, for the longest time, were not allowed in the actual courtroom. We were relegated to the media room, and maybe a pool would show up where you could get the footage. And if they didn't, good luck. And so George Cheedy, who was writing for Rolling Stone, and a vlogger named Infamous Sylvia, filed a complaint and had a hearing before the judge where we were finally able to come into the courtroom. That only happened about a month ago. Before then, there was a time last year, so in 2022, we were allowed in the smaller courtroom, but in January, when they moved up to this larger courtroom, they really started, there were double security checks. They just really ramped up security and really closed off access to that courtroom. And it's the same for family and friends. I will say they've added some additional benches into the courtroom for a trial. So that this week is the first time we're seeing, I want to say it's like 2 or 3 benches that they've added. But it's still not enough for everybody to fit in.
Yeah. I mean, we had a lot of pretty unusual pretrial happenings though, with like a courtroom deputy caught smuggling with the attorneys were involved in some kind of smuggling incident or something.
Allegedly, we had an attorney who was arrested. There was an attorney who, because again, it's really unfortunate. We because they were on high alert for alleged smuggling incidents into the courtroom, they, in addition to, so I don't know if you guys have ever gone into a courtroom, you kind of go through the metal detectors and get searched when you walk in. Well, when we got to the actual courtroom itself, we got a secondary search where they looked through our bags and checked to make sure we weren't smuggling things. There was an attorney there who had some pills who he says they were his pill, they were prescribed to him, but they weren't in their original pill bottle, and he got arrested for that and spent several hours.
Yeah, so I can see the smuggling that maybe is a little overblown. It's like, yeah, maybe they were. Well, he would say, wrongfully.
Yeah, where he's he's like, and according to Georgia law, I'm not required to keep my pills in their original container. So while but he was arrested for that, and so it got a little. I mean, I think even as a reporter and the attorneys were kind of like, we don't feel comfortable coming into the court. What is going to happen to us as we go into the courtroom on a day-to-day basis because it's such high insecurity. But there have been other cases. I'm sure people have seen the footage where somebody allegedly handed Young Thug a Percocet in open court. There was one where somebody smuggled, I want to say it was marijuana into their underwear. They had tried to smuggle it. And there was one where one of the deputies was supposedly having an affair with one of the defendants, and they caught it because she was kind of looking down at her phone and smiling, and at that like similar time he would be typing on his laptop and smiling. And so I think somebody kind of put 2 and 2 together and looked into it, and they have been having some sort of relationship. It is never a dull day in that courtroom. That is what I can tell you for absolute certainty.
Yeah, gosh. So the first day, were there so many people there trying to get into the courtroom? Was there a long line, or
it was pretty crazy. I would say day 2 was much better. And again, I'm assuming kind of as we go along on significant days, right? If Kevin Lyles is the CEO of 300 Entertainment, or T.I. or Lil Wayne comes, right, we'll see kind of people pop up. But I don't anticipate it being like that every day for a 6 month to a year trial. But on day 1, it was pretty packed, and they did. A few fans came to sit in on the trial, and they had them kind of line up, and then they admitted a certain amount. So first come, first serve.
And how was the media room? Do you all have media credentials like bequeathed by the court, or did you get those early on, or how do you get those? Can anyone just show up?
So in you can just show up. In Georgia, we have what's called a Rule 22, where if you file it, you and you say, I want to bring my laptop, or I want to bring my phone, or whatever you want to bring into the court, and that is approved, then that is how, because people are like, how do you have your phone in court, or how do you have your laptop in court? Because I filed a Rule 22 as a member of the media. So anyone can show up and report on this case, but if you don't have a Rule 22, right, you're not going to be allowed to kind of have your phone to go into the media room to record audio and things of that nature. So I filed that pretty early on, a year ago at this point, and have had it kind of through continuation. And the media room itself is the judge's dining quarter. They finally added, when we were pre-trial, there was a screen that was about the size of my phone that it was only 3 or 4 of us, but we would all have to look through that screen to kind of see it. But now they've added an actual small TV, maybe the size of a a large computer screen. They've added that, and there's a very long, lengthy table where everybody kind of sits around and eats lunch and works and reports.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what should we anticipate through the end of the week? You're thinking maybe another gang detective after him, or more gang expert testimony
I
like
think we're
this?
gonna begin to, and we heard this right before we went to lunch. Right, he's now starting this. Belknap is starting to get into kind of the formation of Rock Crew, which is the gang that they say preceded YSL. So I think we're kind of starting to get some of the narrative of like, how did we get here, right? What is this original gang? How did it evolve into what we now know as what prosecutors call young slime life, fans know as young stoner life? How did we kind of get to this? Why is it a gang and not a record label, as defense attorneys say? I think that's what the focus of much of the testimony this week is going to be. And then Friday is an admin day. So it'll be interesting to see what that first admin day will look like. Originally, the judge had said that he was going to take Fridays off throughout the trial. I think a year into this thing and we just started opening arguments, we were like, okay, are we still taking Fridays off, or do we have to make up for lost time? So he hasn't made any real declarations about what Fridays will look like moving forward, but he did say that this Friday would be what's considered an admin day. So the jury will be off, but everybody else will still be present and accounted for.
Great. Well, it looks like they should be back in 15 minutes
15
or so.
yeah.
Well,
although allegedly
they started kind of on time during the last. Well, they started on time as in they came back from the 10-minute break not that long after to tell everyone it was now lunch, which was so frustrating.
Which is again, we are used to this. I have started to joke with some of the other reporters, and when he says we'll come back at 1:45, I'm like, so we'll get started by 2:30. What time do you think we'll actually get started? But that they're supposed to come back at 1:45.
Yeah. The Tory Lanez trial was like that too. Well, again, how can people follow your work and where are you writing for?
Yeah, absolutely. I've written about this case for Billboard, The Guardian. I was on podcasts for Vox and Vice. ABC has a documentary called Rap Trap or Rap on Trial. I don't remember the specific name. It aired in January. It's still on Hulu, so you can go and take a look at that. And my social media handles are at Jewel Wicker. So my name on the screen, show SHOW. You can find my newsletter there. You can find all the articles that I've written this week for Billboard and others. And yeah, that's the best way to stay in touch with my work.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to have you on. And again, I'm like you. How much can we really cover every day of a 6-month trial like this, especially if it's kind of like this with so much downtime and just like
exactly. I'm really trying to figure that out, and I want to make sure that I'm a good resource and that I'm, I think kind of like you were with the Tory Lanez. There's so much misinformation that I really think having access to real credible reporters is essential in some of these cases, and I'm really committed to being one of several voices that are available. But again, I'm still trying to figure out that balance of how much do we cover on a day-to-day basis for a court case that is going to last this long.
Yeah. Well, if Lil Wayne testifies, we'll definitely know.
We will be live tweet. If Lil Wayne testifies, the live tweets will commence. I can tell you that.
Yes. All right. So, hey, well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. See you later on, and we'll be interesting to see how the afternoon turns out.
Absolutely. Thank you, Meghann. Appreciate you.